Hi there, welcome to another video. Today we're going to look at factorising expressions, alright? Now if you're not quite sure what factorising expressions are, it's kind of the reverse of expanding brackets, alright? So what we're going to look to do is we're going to have a bunch of things kind of put together, and we're going to try and look to find out what factors or what is common in every part of that, and then we're trying to look to put it into a bracket. All right, best way of looking at this one really is just kind of get in there, dig deep and see what we can find. All right, so when factorising expression, you need to find the largest whole number that goes into both. Now I'm talking about whole numbers at this point in time, but of course it could be algebra as well, but we're going to come to that in the second half of the lesson effectively as we progress. All right, but we are looking for the highest common factor, all right? Not just any old factor, we're looking to find the highest, all right? If you factorise it by taking out any number, then you're not going to get the marks in the exam. They want you to fully factorise it, and it's often described in an exam as fully factorise something, all right? So that's what we've got to look to do. So factorise 4x plus 8, right? Well, just looking at that right from the outset, before I kind of get into it, you'll hopefully going to recognise that both 4 and 8 are in the 4 times table, all right? So that looks like the highest common factor that appears in there. Now, but you could also argue that 2 goes into both those two. Well, you're absolutely right, 2 does go into both those two, but it's not the highest, all right? So if you divide both these two by 2, then you're going to lose a mark because you haven't fully factorised it, all right? So that's what we're looking to do. So highest common factor of 4 and 8, so I'm looking at the whole numbers to start with. That's all there is in both of those. So the largest factor of 4 and 8 is 4, which is just mentioned. So 4 goes on the outside of the bracket. So we're going to divide both the 4x and the 8 by 4. All right. So when I do 4x divided by 4, what do I need left? Well, it's just going to leave me with the x. All right, because 4 times x is 4x, effectively. Not that difficult. And then I'm going to need to repeat the same process by saying I need to divide the 8 by 4. Well, 8 divided by 4 is 2, but again, keep your eye on the sign, it's a positive, so it needs to be a plus that goes into the middle there. All right, so 4 bracket x plus 2. All right, so if you were to expand that bracket, and that's another lesson on expanding brackets, then it would be 4 times x, which would be 4x, and 4 times 2, which would be 8, which is what we started with. But we are not doing that, we are factorising it, so we're putting it into brackets. So like I said, it's kind of reverse of expanding brackets, and we're now putting it into bracket, okay? So let's have a quick look at this one over here. So 6x minus 15. I kind of tried to highlight the minus there as I was just kind of speaking it, because obviously that makes a difference that goes into a bracket. So we're looking for the highest factor of 6 and 15. Well, as far as I can see it, the highest number that goes into both those two is 3. So that should go on the outside. So there you go, 3 on the outside. And then 6 divided by 3 is 2. But of course I've got an x, so it needs to be a 2x, which goes here. Good. And then I've got a minus here, so that means I need to put a minus in and then divide this one by 15. It's done it the other way around, so divided by 3 first, put the 5, and then put the minus in at the end. All right, so there we go. All right, so that's factorised, okay? All right, let's move on, because there is loads more to this. So some expressions have the same letter in both terms. So what we looked at so far is just having an expression which has a number that appears in both. All right, so basically a highest common factor. But it might be that there is a letter that appears in both those two things. All right, so looking at this example, we've got x squared and 8x. Well, hopefully you can clearly see there is an x in both of these, but there isn't a number in both of these. All right, so what we've only got is just a letter that appears in both. So the highest common factor, or the only common factor that appears in this, is a value of x. And when I talk about the highest common factor, when we're talking about algebra, it's the biggest power that I'm after. Well, this is x squared, so that's the bigger power, but there's only this one here. Well, there isn't an x squared in both of them, so the highest power that goes into both is the x, so hence the x on the outside. All right, so here you can see it just explains that the highest power of x, which is in both terms, there's an x in both x squared and 8x, and so the x goes on the outside of the bracket, which is what I've just kind of explained. All right, so what goes here? Well, x times what gives me x squared, or x squared divided by x is just going to give me another x. All right, so that's going to go there because x times x is x squared. And then when I divide 8x by x, that's just going to give me 8. All right, and then I've got to keep your eye on the sign, which again, this one is a plus, so that's going to go inside there. All right, so that's going to be my factorised version of x squared plus 8x. And then just double check, that's x squared That's 8x, and it's a plus. All right, so I'm happy. All right, so let's have a look at one more, which is a little more awkward because he's got a few more things. But again, concepts are very much the same. I'm looking for letters that appear in both and the highest power of both. Okay, so I'm looking at the a squared b and the minus ab squared. Well, I hope you can see there's an a and b in both of these two things. But is there an a squared in both of these? No. All right, so there's definitely an a. Is there a b squared in both? No. All right, so there's just a b. So there's only a and b that appear in both of them in terms of their lowest powers. All right, so well, the highest that goes into both, I should say. All right, so there is an a and b in both terms. All right, so it's going to take an a and b on the outside. All right, so if I've divided this by ab, well, the b has disappeared. I've divided the a squared by an a, so that's going to leave me with just an a. When we're over here, I've got a b squared. Well, I've divided by a, so that one's gone. I've divided by b, so one of those have gone. So I'm just left with a b, which is over there, and I've got a minus, which kind of goes in the middle. I've gone the wrong way there. So ab times a, which is a squared b, and then you've got ab times b, which would be ab squared. Yeah, so that's good. All right, so there we go. Okay, right, last but no means least, some expressions have letters and numbers in both. All right, so now I'm going to ask you to look at the idea of saying you've got letters and numbers combined together. All right, so this just makes it a little bit kind of more complicated because you've got to look at both letters and numbers at the same time and then try and make sure that you take out as much as you can from all the terms that are in front of you. Okay, so here we go. So I've got 3x squared plus 6x. All right, so your choice in terms of where you start, but I normally just go from numbers first and then letters as I see them. Okay, so numbers first. Well, looking at the 3 and the 6, there's a 3 that appears in both. Okay, in terms of letters, well, the highest power of x that appears in both is just an x. There's an x in that one, and there's an x squared in that one. But so there's an x in both, but not an x squared in both. All right, so it's just going to be an x. So 3 and x go on the outside. They're the two things I've identified. So that's going to form the beginning of my factorized expression. So I've got 3x on the outside here. So what needs to go here? Well, I need another x. I've got a 3. I've got an x. I need another x to make x squared. So I need 3x squared divided by 3x, which is going to give me an x. I'm going to divide this by 3x as well. So 6x divided by 3x. Well, the x divided by x will disappear. And then 6 divided by 3 is going to give me 2. So 2 goes in there, and of course it's a plus. All right. So let's just double check that. So 3x times x, 3x squared. And 3x times 2, which gives me 6x. This is what I started with. Good. Right then, so let's kind of throw it all together and see where we are. Right, I've got a bunch of letters, a bunch of numbers, or everything that's kind of thrown in there. And I'm going to ask you to factorize it. And I've even put a negative in there just to see if you're paying attention. All right, so what have we got? Let you think about it for a second. But I'm going to do numbers first, then I'm going to do A's, and then I'm going to do B's. That's the order I'm going to do it in. So let's have a look at the numbers first. So I've got 8 and 4. Well, that's going to give me, in fact, let's move back a step. And 8 and 4, that means there's a 4 that goes into both those, isn't it? That's the highest one. When I'm looking at a cubed and a squared, well, the highest power there is a squared, isn't it? Because a squared times by another a will go in there. And then when I'm looking at b's, well, the highest power that appear in both is just a b. All right. So I guess what you're looking for in terms of the letters, and when I talk about the highest power that goes into both, well, really you're looking for the lowest one that goes into both, aren't you? Really, because there's a b and a b squared. So the b is the lower one, so that goes into b squared. When I talk about the a squared and a cubed, well, there's an a squared that goes into a cubed. All right. So when I'm actually saying I want the highest common factor, what I'm looking at is I'm not actually looking at the lowest one, aren't I? The lowest power, because that appears into the other one. All right. Also, so we've got 4a squared. So 4 appears in both. A squared, that is the highest common factor, but the lowest one in terms of its powers that goes in there. And then I've got b and a b squared. Well, b goes into b squared. So you've got a b Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So that's going to be the bit that goes on the outside, and then we've got to obviously fill the bit that's inside. What if I've got 4a squared b, and I want 8, so I need a 2. I've already got a b, so I don't need that because that's a b there, and I've got an a squared, and I need a cubed, so I need another a. So it's going to be 2a for the first bit. Then the next bit, so we've got 4 on the outside already, so I don't need that, any numbers. I've got a squared already, so I don't need any a squareds. I've got a b, but I've only got 2 b's needed, so I need another b. So it's going to be a b. There you go, and of course, don't forget the minus that kind of goes in the middle. And as before, like always, you can check that. Well, 4 times 2 is 8. A squared times a is a cubed, and then b, and that gives me that lot. And then 4 times that is just going to give me 4. A squared is just going to give me a squared, and then b times b is going to be b squared. So 4a squared b squared. All right, so that's that done. All right, please do visit maths-school.co.uk and have a go at some of the kind of practice questions. They're obviously increasing difficulty as you kind of progress, but of course, if you kind of stick to the same kind of concept through numbers, letters, and a combination of both, then you shouldn't really have much of a problem. It just takes a bit of practice. So please visit the website and get that practice done, and good luck.